everyone. It's been really wonderful over the past few weeks to hear so many people share the stories behind their favourite Bible verses. And I'd like to share with you a passage that I've got such a vivid memory of reading for the first time. I was 19 and I was preparing to go on a Tier Fund mission trip to Nigeria for 6 weeks over my summer holidays while I was at university. And before you go, you have to go on a residential weekend. And on the first night of the weekend, I was reading my Bible, and I was pretty new to reading the Bible for myself. And I came across a book that I've never heard of in the Bible, the book of Habakkuk. And I read the whole thing. It's a pretty short book, and I do recommend it very much. But I was really struck and really moved by the final 3 verses in Habakkuk. They read, "Though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food. The flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God, the Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on high places." It's such a beautiful prayer of trust in God. A prayer of trust despite all of the difficulties and evil going on around Habakkuk. And it's a prayer that's really stayed with me. It's taught me a huge amount about God, but I think it's particularly taught me 3 things about what it is to find hope and trust in Him. Firstly, Habakkuk resolves to praise God regardless of what's going on around him. It's clear from the passage that Habakkuk is in the middle of a huge disaster. There's no fruit on the fig trees, no grape on the vine, a failed olive crop, all the sheep and the cows have gone. Essentially, absolute disaster and chaos. And yet Habakkuk says, "I will rejoice in the Lord." Habakkuk's hope in God wasn't dependent on his physical circumstances. He knows that he can trust God because God is faithful and he is worthy of praise. Everything in his life may be going wrong, but he would never be without God. Second, Habakkuk knows that God alone is the one who can save him. "I will take joy in the God of my salvation," he says. Habakkuk doesn't look to his own strength, to the people around him, even to the changing seasons to save him. He looks to God alone. I love the title that Habakkuk gives to God, God of my salvation. It's a title that's only used 7 times, I think, in the Bible, and 5 of those are in the Psalms. It's a title that says not only that God can save, but that God alone is salvation. And the third thing that Habakkuk knows is that God, the Lord, is my strength. It's this statement that's key to this whole beautiful hymn of praise from Habakkuk. Habakkuk says 2 things that he is going to do. He says, "I will rejoice and I will take joy in the God of my salvation." And then he says 2 things that God will accomplish. He makes my feet like deer, and he makes me to tread on high places. But sandwiched between all of those statements, we read, God the Lord is my strength. The certain truth of God's present strength enabled Habakkuk to trust in God even during the most difficult times in his life. I first read these verses before my Tier Fund trip, and I had to rely on them much sooner than I expected. The trip was far more difficult than anything I could ever imagine. We all expected to be going on your classic Tier Fund building project, but when we arrived, we were dropped in a school and expected to teach a huge number of students after no preparation, no experience, and no resources. And it was these verses that I came back to, and they gave me hope and strength and encouragement. And at so many points in my life, particularly when things haven't been going well, when things have been falling apart, I've come back to them. I've spoken a bit in church about the really challenging circumstances that brought Amy and I to Bolton. And in the midst of probably my darkest time, I've read these verses and they brought me light and hope. They reminded me that, like Habakkuk, I can choose to praise, even if everything seems to be going wrong. That, like Habakkuk, I can praise God for the salvation that he brings in Jesus Christ. And that by finding my strength in God, I too, like Habakkuk, can trust in God's faithful promises.